I'm Larry Simon, and I work with the .org team here at Google. And I'm going to begin actually with a little apology. Because I terribly regret that I have to leave at about 12 noon myself, and I've apologized to our guest already because I've had a long quarterly conference call that I chair, and I cannot get out of that, I'm afraid. So my apologies to the distinguished speaker, and to the ambassador, and to all of you. It's my honor today to introduce our speaker, Jeffrey Mapendere, and it really is an honor for me. Jeffrey's just been appointed Executive Director of the Canadian Institute for International Institute of Applied Negotiation, and he'll go to that post after having served for many years in Atlanta, where he was the Senior Program Associate of the Conflict Resolution Program at the Carter Center. Jeffrey's work has involved him in many countries, including Mozambique, Zambia, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, Guinea-Bissau, East Timor, Jamaica, Guyana, and Sudan. And I might have left out a few. But lest we wrongly conclude that the brutality of war is only a third world phenomenon, let us remember that the greatest of war deaths in the past 100 years were in Europe. I myself worked in Sarajevo during the siege of that city. After experiencing wars in Central America, in the Horn of Africa, in South Asia, Sarajevo was for me an eye-opener. The former Yugoslavia was not third world. It was a relatively rich country, westernized, a high standard of living, and it all collapsed into some of the worst brutality since the World War. Jeffrey is a conflict analyst, a trainer, a man who knows what it is to live in the bush, to open dialogue, to build trust, to negotiate for healthcare workers, to gain access to the victims of war, to get warring parties to a common table, to watch negotiations fall apart, to see war resume, to watch children recruited as child soldiers, to see them die, to try again, and again, and again. I know a little, just a little, of the world that Jeffrey comes from. I went to Zimbabwe, his native country, just after independence, and at the end of a terrible war for liberation from an apartheid regime. These were the heady days for the people of Zimbabwe. Jeffrey was a commander of troops in the southern province then, and knew the discipline that was needed to win against the great power of machines and money and racism and fear. I worked at that time for Oxfam and witnessed the enormous needs, not just to rebuild, but to begin building out of the poverty bred of mass disenfranchisement of the black population. One of my memories was working with war-disabled veterans in Mapendere land, whose demobilization pay was running out. They called their new farm cooperative in Endebele Vukisanzeli, the Get Up and Do It Yourself Cooperative. This was quite a name for ex-combatants who farmed with missing limbs and in wheelchairs. This has always represented to me the spirit of Zimbabwe, and in a larger sense, the determination of people to live free and to build their own futures, if given half a chance. A dream sadly dying in the Zimbabwe of today. I believe this is what Jeffrey is about. Get up and do it yourself. And he has. From the justice of a war for liberation against apartheid to the killing fields of Sudan, Jeffrey brings hope where there was none. He has said, and as we quoted, any idiot can make war. He has said a single person can cause chaos, but making peace, that's where you need moral giants, real generals, and there are very few, Jeffrey has said. Against the $1 trillion global war industry, in the face of an estimated 10 African civilians who die from war-related causes, for every African soldier who meets his death on the battlefield, Jeffrey brings an alternative. His alternative is also ours, For Google, I believe, represents a world converging, a flow of consciousness across all boundaries and divisions of man. Jeffrey, you are really in the right place. Welcome to Google.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I would like to thank all the staff here at Google for accepting to receive me and give me this opportunity to share some few ideas and some few experiences. These are personal experiences with you. And the idea is not to teach or to lecture, but the idea is to share stories and just personal experience of my own journey in life. And I believe it's quite useful to others just to share these ideas, because it is out of that maybe you might be aware of what is happening in other countries. And even though you never go there, but you read the news all the time, but something to, if I were to give you some practical experience, you might relate to it better. So today I will just give a short presentation. When I was coming down here, I was thinking, okay, what should I present? Google being an organization that provides information, I think now information is power. And you are in a position to save lives if you have information where those people are and what is happening to them and what they need. So you still need to navigate your way to go and help those people. If you don't know where they are, then the help you have is useless. So as you mentioned, I hate talking about myself, but for the sake to give you context, the reason why I will tell you about myself is so that you can see where I'm coming from. And some of my own personal comments may be related to my own personal experience. It's not based on anybody's theory. I have had some experience, as a rebel fighting for the independence of Zimbabwe. So I sometimes tend to use that type of lens, looking at things, at situations. And I had the experience of working as an army officer, especially fighting a civil war in Mozambique, helping the Mozambican government fighting Renamo. So sometimes I use that perspective to look from the angle of a government, fighting a rebel movement. Then also I have worked with the Carter Center, as a peacemaker. You also use that lens and I use that angle. So sometimes you might see myself loitering around in those and giving certain perspectives you might not find in the book. But I think I use these different angles to look at a situation, and some of the comments will relate to that. This presentation is about, everybody knows about peacemaking. You have heard, I think most of you have heard about negotiations. Is there anybody here who can tell me a place where you heard that there were negotiations for peace? Anywhere in the world? Anybody?
Camp David.
Oh, Camp David, exactly. That was between governments. Anybody who has heard something between a government and a rebel group? Israel-Palestine? Chechnya? Uganda? Sri Lanka, yes? Frelimo Renamo? Thank you very much. The reason why I'm asking this question is not to test your knowledge. I'm not going to give you a test. But I'm just trying to say, there are differences. The difference, when you talk about Camp David, we're talking about two governments facilitated by head of state, which was President Carter during that time. And you see, it was very easy for him to get in touch with the two heads of states from other countries to come here and do that. Then it becomes a different issue when you're talking about a government in the rebel group or two rebel groups. Why? Because the setup is totally different. Governments, they have all the means of communication they want. You can send a fax, you can telephone them and talk to them and invite them and they can talk to you. But with rebel groups, sometimes they're right in the thicket inside a bush because they're hiding. And how do you get to them? And in Africa, most of the time, they wouldn't have that technology. They wouldn't have the cell phones. They wouldn't have the radios. They wouldn't have the fax. And how do you do that? Most of the time, people talk about what you see at the White House, people shaking hands after a peace agreement. But they don't talk about the smallest thing, which is, I believe, is very important. which is the first step to peace processes. How do you get in touch with these people? How do you communicate with them? We're talking about communication here. How do you communicate with these people to convince them that they need to sit down, to come out of the bush and talk? Because people tend to say, oh, well, let's go and talk with these rebels. How do you do it? So this is what I call, the first brick in peace process construction. It is just reaching out to those rebels. And I emphasize on rebels because those are the most difficult groups, to get in touch with. Governments, you have embassies. I think the ambassador is here. If President Carter wants to send a letter, to the government of Tanzania, definitely we go to him and we send it through him, through the diplomatic bag, and it goes back to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, and then to the President. Then the channel goes on. But with a rebel, Joseph Kony, those who know in Uganda, he doesn't have an ambassador. He doesn't have a radio. Let alone he doesn't have a house. Every tree is his house. So where do you go? So that's the idea. So I'm going to, setting the stage, how I'm trying to situate you to understand what we do. And this comes from personal experience. I'm giving examples of what things I have done personally, and so that you can see how this thing starts before you even bring people to the table. Here I'm going to give you 4 different types of armed movements. The reason why you see later, it's critical to know who you are dealing with. Know your enemy. It's the basic rule. But of course, as peacemakers, we don't say know your enemy. You know the parties. Here, of course, that was my former rebel group, which was called the Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army, ZANLA. And I think, Mr. Ambassador, you know very well, because they gave us guns and they gave us training. And during that time, you were accused of supporting terrorists, Rhodesian terrorists. Yeah. So you see how terrorism can be used. So my experience is from that. I can say from my youth, I was in that movement. And I have an understanding of what rebels experience and what difficulties they face. And sometimes people say, oh, this rebel is too stubborn, they don't want to talk. But sometimes it's not because they really don't want peace, but because maybe the mechanisms are so complicated to them. You need to speak their language. You need to lower yourself to their level to understand, to empathize with them. So within my own personal experience, I have learned a lot during that time, which that same information, I apply it in my present profession as a peacemaker. But during that time, when I left that organization, after demobilization, during the transformation, I never thought that experience was useful. People will say, for you to be a peacemaker, you need to go and get a degree in mediation, conflict resolution, or you have to go and be a diplomat, you have to do this and that. But nobody will tell you that being a rebel is useful. But of course, we don't want you to be rebels. But I discovered that information, that knowledge is very critical to peace processes because you tend to understand those groups. That was me with my friend a long time ago when I was still young. And here we have Renamo. Most of you have maybe read a lot about Mozambique, and there was a civil war for 16 years between Renamo and Frelimo after the independence of Mozambique. For certain reasons, we wouldn't want to go into that. But it was a different organization. Ours were fighting for the independence of Zimbabwe. It was oppression and all that stuff. Renamo, totally different story. Of course, some people say they were fighting to spread democracy. Wow, during the Cold War, people always say that. But we know Renamo was a creation of the Rhodesian intelligence, and later on handed over to South African intelligence, and they continued to use them. And I really know them very well. I used to know them by names. Then I fought as a soldier, a Zimbabwe National Army soldier, fighting Renamo. So I was looking at things from a different angle of a soldier fighting rebels. So we used to know where they were hiding because they were hiding where we used to hide too. Then on top we have the LRA, Lord Resistance Army. I think many people have heard about this movement, which is spiritual. They are fighting for 10 commandments. They are abducting children. They are killing people. They are doing all weird things. My experience with them is when I was with the Carter Center, because the Carter Center, brokered a peace agreement between Sudan and Uganda in 1999, and I joined the Carter Center at the time of implementation of that agreement. And one of the pieces was to find a way to create peace in northern Uganda between the Ugandan government and the rebel movement. So I had some experience with them from that angle. Then we have the SPLA, Sudanese People's Liberation Army. And I think most people know that they are part of the government in Khartoum, and also they have their own government in southern Sudan. I had my experience also with them, even when I was still in the Zimbabwe National Army, because they had a representative in Zimbabwe, because we recognized them as a genuine liberation movement, different philosophy. They were like a government in exile. So were we during that time. Renamo, the problem was they were only an armed movement. They didn't have a political wing. That makes a difference when you want to start the peace process. If somebody is just a general, he has no minister, he has nothing, he doesn't have a political advisor, it's him, and he believes in his spirits. So when do you start negotiating with them? How would you know that the spirit today is conducive to negotiations? How would you know? You can't plan on a spirit. But at least if I have somebody like John Garang, you can plan and say, I know his strategy, I know his philosophy. So these are the different groups. You would see that they're different in how they are constituted, and also in terms of their philosophy, their ideology. And that is critical. When you want to get in touch with these people, you need to know who they are. So, there's a lot of information that is required. You need to know about these people. And we have done this also in several ways. I'm just using John Garang here as an example. But all these things I've mentioned here, I'm not going to read that. But you really need to know who they are, what is their philosophy. For example, during the Liberation War, we totally believed that we are a liberation movement. We're fighting for the independence of Zimbabwe. Our tactics, we were trained mostly by the Chinese and Chinese tactics, of course, in the Tanzanians. They trained us very well. And we respected what we called human rights, but not in the same way we say human rights, but you had to respect. All the Mao Zedong's doctrine, respect the masses. You are like fish in water, things like that. Each time you destroy something, you go to repay it. If you borrow something from a village, you take it back. This is really basic public relations with the population, because we really had to, we had no logistical plan. The people were our logistical plan. We had no medical evacuation. The people were our medical evacuation plan. We didn't have any rescue plan. The people would rescue us and hide us in a cave if you're injured. So you better treat them well. So that was our philosophy. And we looked at ourselves as a government in exile. So if you wanted to get in touch with somebody, you go to Maputo, and you would find someone, maybe Mugabe there, or his senior officials there. You can talk to Samora, and he can give you access. Or you go to Tanzania, our friends will tell you, oh, yeah, we know where they're hiding. Come and talk to them. So you need to know all these things. Then another thing is that after having known the side of the rebel movement, you need to understand. After having known the rebel movement, you need to understand the government side. I'm just using myself as an example. When we were in Mozambique during the Civil War, from 1985 to 1992, there was a Kenyan diplomat. Now he's quite a reputable mediator called Ambassador Kiplagat. He was very instrumental in initiating contact between Frelimo and the Renamo to start the peace process. And we, as Zimbabwean forces, were fighting Renamo. As soldiers, as the military, we really didn't care about that. In fact, we didn't want it to happen. Because as a soldier, as an officer, my promotion comes from fighting, not from the table. Only the politicians benefit from the table. I benefit from the ground. So I was looking at what the next battle to fight in order. If we were to kill Jakama, definitely I was going to be made a general. Definitely. So when this man was trying to initiate peace, we were busy looking for any aircraft that would come to try to pick up Jakama to go anywhere, and we would shoot it down. And one time he told me, I bumped into him in Kenya. We invited him to give a talk at one of the trainings we had when I was at the Carter Center. Then we started talking about this, and he said, oh, you were in the Zimbabwe National Army? I said, yeah. You know, you guys nearly killed me. Then I said, I don't know that. He said, no, there was a time when I was supposed to come and pick up Jakama, and we had a small aircraft from Malawi flying down into Tete, and we were told, maybe through South African intelligence, that the base where Jakama is being attacked right now. So we made a U-turn. Then I said, oh, that's interesting. You know, but because he didn't know what we were doing, if they were studying, following us, and maintaining a close contact with intelligence on us, knowing our movements and our battle plans, they could have known that it was the wrong time to try to contact that rebel group. So it's critical. This is life and death. So it's a very risky business. Then, as the third part, for example, we're talking about the Carter Center, or anybody here in future can be a mediator. Never believe that working where you are, you will never be involved in a peace process. You are always involved in this peace process, and at any time, some people who initiate these things are ordinary people who are not even politicians, because they have a friend who comes from maybe a certain country where there is war. He talked to his father. He said, oh, you know what? If you can contact so and so, you can do it. Then you start making all those telephone calls, and before you even know it, you are already in the business of peacemaking. So as a third party, you are the peacemaker. What is it that you need to know? Peacemakers, sometimes they make mistakes. And your mistakes can jeopardize the whole process. Your mistakes can cause death to the rebels, can cause death to the government. For example, if you go to meet with the rebels, then on your way back, then you tell the government where they were and what they were doing. You are giving them intelligence, and then the next thing they go and attack them. And that, you lose your credibility. Then at the same time also, if you are talking to the government, you go and feed that information to the rebels, you have a problem. Let me give you an example. In this picture here, this picture was taken in 2003 by somebody. The gentleman here was a civilian in northern Uganda. When Uganda trying to talk to the LRA, what you see here are LRA rebels. So the local guys would always go to the bush and talk to them. Some of their brothers, they know them. And the guy happened to have been a rebel himself, but eventually he was injured, then captured, recovered. But now he was just an ordinary man. So he would go in and out of the bush, talking to them and back. But what we had is that he's the one who gave me this picture. I wasn't there in the bush. He came with me and said, oh, Jeff, if you want to talk to the rebels tonight, I can go. I've been there. Here's the picture. So send me. Let's go together. Then I said, oh, no, I can't do that. And then what happened is we were supposed to meet with the rebels sometime. And we understand he went somewhere where he met with the rebels, came back. But the rebels believed that he sold the information to the government of Uganda. Then what happened is that the rebels, where they had congregated that day, they were attacked. And nobody knew about that except him. So some of them were killed. Then some survived. And what happened is eventually they invited him again. They were using cell phones, because of technology. They called him, said, can we meet? Then he went to meet with them. And they thought everything was fine. But they were suspecting him of spying. And what happened next is that they killed him. They killed him. And I was still there when he was killed. And he was positioning himself as an intermediary. But at least we don't know the truth. But with the rebels, you never know the truth. Maybe it's true. In my own movement, it used to happen. There are people who would be going both ways, and then they end up in trouble. So as a third party, this is what I'm talking about, you just have to understand such type of dangers. It's a danger to yourself, it's a danger to the rebels, it's a danger to everybody. So you better walk a very fine line, and you have to know exactly what you're doing, and trust others and trust yourself. Then as we go along, trying to reach out to these rebels, with the Carter Center, we had some problems. After the Nairobi agreement that was signed in Nairobi, the problem was that these rebel movements were not part of the negotiations. It was a bilateral negotiation between governments. But however, it was penalizing them because the two governments had agreed to disband these rebel movements. The LRA, the Lord Resistance Army, was supported by Sudan. So the Sudanese government, they said they were going to disband them. So we were trying to position ourselves. The Carter Center had met, some of my colleagues had met with the rebel leader before. But after that, they no longer trusted us. So we really wanted to pursue peace, so we were going to reestablish communication with them. And how do you do it? We used to do it through Sudan, because the Sudanese used to host them. But now the Sudanese was, no, we can't host them anymore because they are labeled terrorists. After 2001, when they were put on the international terrorist list, nobody could touch them. But now we had to pursue still, so we tried through northern Uganda to go and talk to them. All what we did here, my colleague and I, we just go into the bush to meet with the rebels to deliver President Carter's letter. That goes back to my first point. How do you communicate with the rebels? You might believe that the sophistication of President Carter, former president, you would maybe send a fax or some diplomat. But now here you are dealing with a rebel. So how do you deliver the letter to? This is a serious operation, I'm telling you. Serious. How do you deliver Jimmy Carter's letter to Connie, who is in the bush? There are so many problems. One, the Ugandan military wouldn't want you to. They will not be comfortable with you going in there and meeting the rebels, coming back, because they don't know what you're doing. And sometimes you can't disclose too much. Although we had a letter from President Museveni that we should contact them, but you cannot reveal that information too much, because we had seen so many things happen. When you reveal the information, we go back to my point I told you when I was in the military. We're not worried about, we didn't care about the peace process between Renamo and the Frelimo. We were concerned about our promotion. Personally, I'm telling the truth. I was really concerned about my promotion when I'm going to become a major. Then my commander tells me, Jeff, if you go out in the bush and you kill Lakama, straight from here to State House for a medal, and you're maybe brigadier. So that's important. Same with the Ugandan army. You need to know them. You need to know their motivation. They wouldn't worry about you going there and say, we want to talk with the LRA. They'll tell you, LRAs, they're sick. We just shoot them. So you might be caught in a crossfire. So it was difficult to deliver the letter, but we had to. But sometimes you can send couriers, small boys who are trusted. But how do you know that they are the real staff? And how would you know that the people they gave to is the real LRA? Because the military intelligence would also be playing their own tricks. They might have some fake rebels in there. Then you give a letter, it goes to their fake guys, it comes back to them. Then you sit and say, oh, Jimmy Carter's letter has gone to Connie. It's not there. So you have to do it yourself. But how do you do it? It's like walking in a minefield. You have the rebels themselves also, they need to trust you. Because if they become suspicious, you're not coming back. That's the truth. I saw it in my own movement. People would come, and we suspect them of having given a radio, some secret radio by the Rhodesians. They're not going back. And that's a given. This is risky business. Because if you let somebody go and he sells that information, you're dead. So you better keep him. And that is if you are lucky. Sometimes they don't keep you a logistical burden. They just kill you. So on this particular day, we arranged to go there and meet with the LRA. What do you think were the logistics we took into consideration in going there? Just imagine, I've given you all these scenarios about the dangers. Now, this particular day, we wanted to go and meet with them. What logistics did we put together? What considerations did we make? Anybody? Water. Yes, of course. Uganda is very hot, 41 degrees Celsius. That's true.
Meet at an unknown place or a different place?
Very good. Unknown place, somewhere where nobody knows except you and the rebels. What else?
Time of day. The time of day you would go.
Very critical. You must have been a rebel before. Time of day. Very critical because we thought, okay, well, let's go at night because it has to be a concealed operation. What are the dangers of going at night? One, most of the time the military would also have their ambushes at night because the rebels would also move at night to go to certain places if they know the government is patrolling during the day because they use aircraft. So you might fall in that ambush and you're dead. That's it. Okay, but however, the advantage is there's concealment of darkness. You can go there at night. Nobody's seeing you from afar, so you can just go around as long as you know way to go. Then during the day, it's the opposite. During the day, you can be seen. Then if you are seen, you're not going anywhere. They have some roadblocks or whatever it might be. But the advantage is, at least you can see the danger in front of you. And most of the time, everybody's moving around. Even the civilians are also moving around. So you can mix with them and go. Okay, we decided to go during the day. What was the problem? Think of another problem. A logistical burden. We were two. It was me and my colleague, the gentleman you see there from Australia. Very good. My partner was a problem. He was white. He's white. In the middle of these black people. So to be seen a white man walking in the bush, people say, we've seen a madman. Because what is he doing there? Because it's only the locals you see in the bush. It's either they're cutting firewood, they are weeding, some are, hunting and doing their own things, or maybe, taking some information to the rebel. But if you start to see a white guy walking in northern Uganda in the bush, there's something wrong with him. And you wouldn't go far. You wouldn't go far. Even the villagers would stop him. Not only the military, the villagers would stop him. What's wrong with you? So we decided, what do we do now? To hide Chris. Chris was a problem. I wasn't a problem because, I could just see, of course I wouldn't wear like this. I would just wear the local things and just, walk around if it required. Walking barefooted, I could do that. And I would just mix and just go. But Chris was a problem. So what we did is we said, borrowed a shirt. That shirt he's wearing, borrowed it from somebody. Long-sleeved shirt. Then we said, okay, another thing, transport. What means of transport? We talked about the place. The place was far, maybe 10 miles away in the bush. How do we go 10 miles away and, you have to do that in time. So we had a motorbike. We rented a motorbike from somebody. Said, can we have your motorbike? Don't ask where. Here is the money. Gives us a motorbike. Then a bicycle. So Chris took a motorbike. We had to give him a helmet to cover the face, long-sleeved shirt, so that when he goes on the bike, nobody sees exactly his complexion. And he was driving fast. Of course, he had in northern Uganda, you can't ride a motorbike by yourself. You can't do it because it's a means of transport. You need to have a passenger. So he had one or two guys behind him. So they drove off. Then we and my other colleague were to get a bicycle. And you can't ride a bicycle by yourself. It's either you're carrying firewood or you have a passenger. So we had this local boy cycling. I was, these are big bicycles with some frame in between and then a seat at the back. So one was sitting there, another one. So the three of us on the bicycle. So it was quite normal, So we went. We managed to go through. But we didn't know exactly where we were going to be stopped because the rebels said they knew the place. We would just see somebody stopping us. Then he will lead us away. So we did. And we managed to continue that. So those were the logistics. But however, still, besides that, you also need to understand the context, the local context. Whilst we were doing that, the local leaders and other people were also trying to meet with rebels. And on this particular day, there was a huge, huge operation where the religious leaders, I'm talking about bishops and traditional leaders, the chiefs, had organized a meeting with the second man in command, Joseph Kony, the rebel leader's deputy, who had accepted to meet with them in the bush. And even President Museveni's brother, a general, wanted to go there to meet with them. So to strike a deal, they had declared a unilateral ceasefire. On that same particular day, we were trying to meet with them, everybody's trying to meet with them. So you need to take that into consideration. How do your activities fit into that? Because you don't do things in isolation. So this is just sort of a strategy for that type of stuff. So we talked about means of transport. I told you Chris took a motorbike. But when we got in the bush, you have to hide it. So you get on the road, you're stopped, then you push it into the bush, you hide it somewhere so that nobody sees it. Then off, you walk some other more kilometers led by the rebels themselves. They have their own perimeter, security, you don't see these little guys hiding in the bush, but they see you. So you go. In case maybe we are coming with the military behind us. So that's Chris trying to retrieve the bike. And also the communication with the rebels. What else are you going to use to communicate with them? This I'm just giving you as an example here. There are so many ways. I told about leaflets, letters, and all that stuff, going face to face. So we were trying to go for this, for face to face. That's what we were trying to do. But in other places, people can use helicopters to distribute messages. The helicopter, you see, this was during our time in Zimbabwe, when it still was Rhodesia. But sometimes in sophisticated areas, for example, the picture you see there, that was John Garang organized a rally in southern Sudan in 2002, and we were also invited to this rally. But it is a sophisticated guy. You can see the level of communication. So the communication goes both ways, with the rebels and the rebels to you. But in southern Sudan, the SPLA were so developed that they were now working like a government, organizing civil society, having their own organizations, and even addressing rallies. So you need to know all these activities, what's going on. This one is just a part of this propaganda. Okay, here we are again. On the same process as I was talking, we decided to go and see them face to face. We'd organized our transport. We'd organized everything. So now we arrived at the place. We met with the rebels. And that's a letter, President Carter's letter, being given to the local commander, Lieutenant Colonel, where it come there. And you can see this guy, how he's posing with his gun. All rebels want to pose for pictures. You saw my picture there before? I was also going like this. So any rebel, go to Sri Lanka. If you were to photograph, you meet the Tamil tigers and say, no, can I take a picture? You go like this. If it doesn't matter where you go. They love this stuff. So that guy was posing. This boy here asked, he was 13 years old. He's a rebel, child soldier, what we're talking about. This one's 16. He's a bodyguard to the commander, who is a lieutenant colonel, but he's 21. If you see a lieutenant colonel at 21, there's something going on. Well, he's an adult, but if you see a 16-year-old with an AK, something is wrong. If you see a 13-year-old, something is wrong. This is where you get depressed. I saw these kids, personally, and my heart decided to sink. And this is older than the other guy I saw. I think this boy, when we were leaving, he was hiding somewhere in the bush. We didn't see him. Only as we passed, he stood up because we had a camera. So he also wanted a picture. He wanted a picture. Can you take me a picture? This boy was not older than 12, to be honest, because the jacket was going down like that. And even the AK was too big for him. So you start to see the problems. But as a peacemaker, what do you do with that? Should you run away from there straight away to go to a human rights organization and say, go and arrest them, I saw the way they are, or to the army, go and bomb them? It's a moral dilemma. You can't do that. Because if you do that, they are coming to bomb a little kid who is a victim of abduction. And now he is also turned into a killer. But what do you do? All you can do is to try to trust your heart and say, we are going to move forward with the peace. If we can stop the war, then all these things will disappear. But if you want to go and fight, then all you're doing is you're murdering these little boys. And I personally am not for that. And this is what we're doing as the Carter Center, and we don't believe in that. Well, in doing this business also, you need to create rapport with these fellows. Because you can't just do this. These people, it's risky to do this business. It's very difficult. You don't see this in the reports that are written to donors or whatever, because it's something very small and people don't talk about it. But it's the most important thing is risky business. So you need to use your own personal skills of networking, creating friendships. And at the Carter Center, we create friendships from the top to bottom, from the president to the last person, organizations, and everybody. And even you can be a partner in this thing. But here, at our level, at that lower level, when you're meeting at the grassroots, well, how do you create a friendship with these guys? This is a picture I took of the rebel leaders' parents in Uganda. You take these pictures where you used to give them food. These are old people. The father, that time, the father was 75, the mother, I think, was 73. They were working manual labor on a tea plantation in Uganda. And that's pretty difficult, and the money was nothing. So sometimes we'd go to give them food, and we take pictures or record whatever message they have to their son. Then we send them that information to the son. And the son said, oh, the Carter said at least they know my mother is living. He is there, she's there, and you send that information, he hears the voice. It will change him bit by bit, and he will start to trust you. So for these guys, you give them gifts and other things when you go, but this is very tricky. It becomes very difficult. What type of gifts would you give to a rebel if you are visiting a rebel?
AK-47s?
then you'll be arrested. What type of present can you bring? I am a rebel. Then you say, Jeff, can I come and see you? Then I said, please come. What type of token of appeasement can you bring me? Something small, just as a friend. Cigarette? Yeah? Yeah? Clothing? Then it can be tricky. Because if the government catches you with that, with clothing, these guys, sometimes they operate in uniforms, some don't have uniforms. So whatever clothing you gave, you are aiding the enemy. It can be tricky. And I've seen in northern Uganda, I remember one priest who was shot by the government. Fortunately, he didn't die. But he was delivering medicine to them. Some of them were wounded. He was giving some painkillers. This is not sophisticated medicine. Painkillers, bandages, and all that stuff. And he was shot. And he was called. They said, no, this guy, we're going to try him because he was aiding the enemy, trying to, heal their wounds so that they can fight again. So definitely, you can't escape that. So you have to be pretty careful. And when, you look, yes, there's some bags here. These boys also were local boys. They brought them something, some food, whatever. I and Chris, we said, you know what, we have to walk a fine line here. We brought them something. We brought them toilet paper. What's the significance of toilet paper for a rebel? Just imagine. Toilet paper. We all know toilet paper. Yes, rebels don't have a toilet paper. There is no supermarket there. And how important is it to them? It's important, but not very important. So here the idea is that you take something, you try to be naive, you take something which you believe is important, and yet you know very well it's not important to them. So that even if you are caught, nobody can say, oh, you were aiding the enemy because you brought them toilet paper. Oh, come on. Even in court, I think the judge would understand that, Mr. President Museveni, you're saying the Carter Center was aiding the enemy by Jimmy Carter sending a toilet paper to Joseph Kony. People would just say, oh, come on. So we brought that and, a little bit of gum. Then they say, why would you bring toilet paper? Then they said, oh, we thought you wanted it. You thought it was necessary. I said, oh, come on. They started laughing. Come on. But they believe, genuinely, these guys, we really, trying to give them something. But at least they said, next time when you come, bring us something. And then they'll say, okay, can we give you some films to develop their pictures? Then we take them pictures. Would you send us some back? Oh, sure. It's his picture. Take him picture, then you send him back. So, and to them, those pictures are very, very important to a rebel because you always want to keep a record of yourself, and it's very difficult to keep that record. When we were fighting, we were not allowed to take pictures. We were not allowed to take pictures because if you take your pictures and start leaving it behind, you can be identified in future. And it can be taken by the government, then they take it and they put it on television. Who knows this guy? Then it will be traced back to your parents. And then your parents are going to be arrested or they're going to be killed. So it's a security risk. But still, they want to have those. Before I close, there are some very important things, a person needs to know because you really need to read the signs so that when danger is coming, you know danger is coming, and you can withdraw pretty fast. Don't become too familiar with these rebels. It doesn't matter where. I don't know whether you are in Colombia, whether you're in Afghanistan, whether you're what. You don't become familiar with these fellows. You might be a journalist, you might be a peacemaker, you might be a human rights person. If yes, you have access to them, you go and meet with them. But be careful, don't be too familiar with them. Oh, I know Commander Ngisi, Commander so-and-so is my friend. you can. Just continue to be very careful. And when you start to see them changing their attitude towards you, you better just stop. If they had promised to meet with you in a particular day, and they tell you, oh, no, it's no longer necessary, don't force yourself. And if they say, and also listen, when you go to a bar, it's very important to go to these bars and listen to the locals as they talk. If your activities are no longer appreciated, just stop and do something else. So these are some of the things that happen at that stage. When there are opportunities for cooperation, you do it. That is John Garang, when we were down in southern Sudan. We always worked with him, we do other things, training, in mediation, training in negotiations. We would give them that training for negotiations. That is really good aid to a rebel group. You're building their capacity to go to the table to negotiate. And we did that. Well, sometimes you go to little things like just negotiating a meal. How much are you going to pay for a goat or a chicken so that you can have lunch? So all those things, you blend with the community. Be part of them. But if you isolate yourself and you continue to eat at the hotel and all this stuff, you lose a lot of information. You go there, you sleep where they sleep, here listen to the villagers, you get a lot of intelligence from them, which you would use to plan your peace operations. So these are some of the things I just wanted you to introduce you to the type of work we do, and just at this micro level, and which, however, it builds onto a lot of stuff. Right now, the war is still going on. The Sudanese are helping to mediate between the Ugandan government and the LRA, and it doesn't stop. Even former President Chisano is there of Mozambique helping. So you can see how complicated these things are. And this was in 2003, and we're in 2007. But do you stop? No. You just continue persistently. Thank you very much. Any questions? If there are any general questions, I wouldn't mind.
Hi. So I lived in Lebanon during the whole civil war. And one of the things that happens in negotiations is, when do these negotiations have a chance of succeeding? Obviously, they don't have a chance of succeeding when somebody thinks they're going to win. So what is critical about, when during the whole process of the war, when the Carter Center can intervene?
That's a very important question. Most people would believe that you have to intervene when there's a chance of success. But in this, you're dealing with human beings. There are so many things you can predict, but you cannot predict a human's reaction to your action and how they're going to react when they get to the table. I've seen people sitting down and plan mathematically and say, well, I know if he makes this move, we're going to make that move. Yes, there's a business model for negotiations. But when you go to the politics, it's a different world. And also, some people have argued that, there's some theorists who say there is a time for ripeness. You can tell when the conflict is ripe for intervention. So that's the only time a third party can go and you are guaranteed success. And what is the meaning of success, and what is the value of success, and what's the morality of success? Because success, is it success about you as a mediator so that you have something under your belt that, oh, look at me, I mediated this, and it became successful, I brokered this. So is it about your ego? Or success is a moral issue that is about those people if they are going to succeed themselves, not your success. Is it the success of the mediator or the success of those parties? And how do you operationalize success? Because that's why I call it a peace process. It starts where I was told, this type of presentation, to way up when people shake hands. But to reach there are so many steps. These attitudinal changes. In a peace process, it's not about an activity. It's about a process of changing attitudes so that when you go to the table, the position you had before that you were not going to budge, you have changed after 2 days or 3 days of negotiation. You said, well, I can give in this, I can give in that. But if you wait for the right time for ripeness, and people sometimes operationalize this to say the right time to intervene is when people have been fighting and they're exhausted. Your brother is fighting with his wife, and they say, let me wait until they're exhausted so that when I go to be little work just to separate them. Then you are no longer useful. If people have bled to death, then you say there is no longer any more blood to spill, then that's the time you come in. Why are you coming? What's the purpose of peace process? Is to save life. And we are talking about human rights. The most important human right for anybody is the right to live. I saw a picture, I can't remember which organization took it, I think UNHCR, of a little African girl, asked the question, what would you want to be when you grow up? The little girl said, I would like to be alive. That says a lot. It means in a high environment, life is the most important thing. It's not about being a doctor, because not many kids live up to the age of 5. So if you are a peacemaker, you wait until somebody dies to intervene. I believe you intervene wherever you can intervene. If there's an opportunity, go there. Take risks. At the Carter Center, we have a policy that a failure is acceptable. We really accept failure. We can go in, and even if we fail to strike a deal with these people, that's fine. But at least we did something. Next time when they come, we said, you remember that time you guys had the courage to come here, but however, let's move on from where we left. Or somebody else can do that, because changing attitudes requires a lot of steps, and you cannot do it by yourself. So I cannot pinpoint the right time, but I think as long as people have invited you, if they've shown some commitment to say, yes, we're coming to the table, go there with them to the table. But of course, I know now with other organizations about money, who is going to sponsor that, and are they going to sign a deal or maybe give them a timetable? That's where there's a problem when you give them a timetable, because it's attitudinal changes. Any question? If there are no questions, yes?
Hey. So in the beginning, you talked a little bit about how technology influences these certain things. And we've all read stories about terrorists posting what they're going to do online. Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about how as Google as a company, also technology might influence this going forward.
Oh, I didn't get the last part.
Yeah, talk to us a little bit about how technology might influence some of the modes of communication.
Oh, yeah. There's quite a lot. I can tell you technology is changing things, even within rebel movements in peace process. But I think not enough is being done to utilize it for peace. There's a lot of technology being used for war, but not much of it is being used for peace. And I strongly believe, given an opportunity, there's something creative we can do. Okay, basically, I was talking about the rebels in northern Uganda. When we fought, we didn't have radios. It's critical. We didn't have radios. Just a simple example. One of our friends, when he was still a rebel, they were sitting, and one went to the bathroom. And, as rebels in the bush, when you call bathroom, it's just behind a hill or behind a bush. So he went there. When he was there, another guy also decided to go out to relieve himself. And so he was walking quietly, Then the other guy looked through the bushes. He saw these legs going like this. And he thought, well, it was the Rhodesian forces. He started running. And the other guy had the other one running, and he started running. Those in the base had people running, and they started running. So everybody ran away. And when rebels are running away, I'm not talking about 100 meters. When you are a rebel, you're running away, you have to go at least 10 miles to be safe. Because if you are going to be attacked, they can come with helicopters. You have to go outside the orbiting zone of the helicopter for you to start to say, I can start breathing. So people ran almost half a day. Then meet a certain place. He said, okay, so what happened? I don't know. I saw you running. Then the other one says, oh, no, I saw you running. Then they discovered they were running from themselves. But because they didn't have communication, if they had radios, they could have said, no, I didn't see anything. Then they started communicating. But now, their cell phones, the LRA, as we're talking about now, they are using cell phones to call to the local radio with cell phones and say, hey, I'm Commander so-and-so. Can I speak to so-and-so? What you are accusing us of killing those civilians, we didn't do it. It was the government. Then somebody comes in and they talk, and even talk to their own parents. And it changes them. Some are lured by civilians to come out of the bush because of that technology. And some, we started creating friendships with them because when they have their cell phones in the bush, they can't charge those cell phones. They lose batteries. They say, can you help us because you want to communicate with us for peace process, but the batteries are flat. Can you buy us a charger? We're looking all over for a solar charger for a cell phone, we couldn't find it. A solar said, that is the only thing that is sustainable. You can use it in the bush. There's plenty of sunshine. But there was no solar charger. Just those small little things, that communication is required. And I believe also that there's a lot of intelligence we are losing. There is intelligence which is passed to the governments to use to fight the war. But we need intelligence in order to fight for peace, to wage peace. You need to know what is going on out there. You know, you can collect that information and give it to a peacemaker so that they can act. You know, there are three things. You can prevent the conflict by knowing all those indicators. You know what's going on if you can collect information and have that information available. So I think technology, I don't know what it is that we can create, but I think if people sit down, technicians and peacemakers, and we tell you where our problems are, and you say, okay, this I think how we can solve it through information. I think that can be done. Technology plays a very important role. Thanks. Ambassador, you?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for this presentation. To give a much more complete picture, can you try to explain to us the complexity of the process from establishing contact with the rebels to mediation, to negotiations, and to a peace agreement? I have in mind where sometimes the initiative can be a multiple process involving several actors, and how those actors can coordinate among themselves until you eventually get some kind of a peace agreement. Take the northern Uganda, where the Carter initiative has played a very significant role. Then by the time it reaches a certain stage, maybe it's taken over by a regional organization and eventually reaches probably the United Nations. You know, this multiplicity but complementary processes that are brought to bear on a successful agreement, peace agreement, maybe even on an unsuccessful peace agreement.
Thank you very much. I think, Ambassador, read my paper. You use the complementarity. There is a paper, you can get it on the internet, it's the Culture of Peace online journal. It talks about take 1.5 diplomacy. That's how we operationalize what we are doing at the Carter Center. As you mentioned, yes, you start with that little contact. Then maybe you manage to do something, maybe to talk to them a little bit. For example, Northern Uganda, I can give you a very good example. The process, we didn't start with it ourselves. The religious leaders and the local leaders have been doing it, trying to negotiate with them. But they didn't have the power to pull President Museveni to say, do something. It's difficult. You know, he's the head of state. But however, we had that a bit of credibility with heads of state because of President Carter's presence. You talked to President Museveni, and he had mediated between President Museveni and President al-Bashir. So he knew these people before. And President Museveni appreciated President Carter, and he has great respect for him. So he had given us that green light to go ahead. If we could establish contact with Kony, President Museveni was prepared to send his team to negotiate. So all what we're doing is to reach out to him and say, yes, we have a letter from President Museveni. He says he wants to negotiate with you. Can you accept that and come out? We can decide of a venue. But that never happened. But however, after we discovered that things were not moving well because Kony was running away deeper and deeper into the bush, and also the war was starting the second time, you know, with Operational Iron Fist, which was initiated by the government of Uganda through their bilateral relations with Sudan, they went in. So we discovered, you know, we're spinning our wheels. Then, however, we had a local woman, former Minister Betty Bigombe. She came in, and with a lot of influence, respect, she comes from the north, and she initiated a peace process. The other picture I showed you of the LRA, it was her with them out in the bush. Even some NGOs, some embassies went even into the bush. Cows were slaughtered to have lunch. And so it means that complementarity. And we would help her with any information we had from our previous intervention. They said, you know what, this is where we ended. This is what we can use. Sometimes also they'll call us, sometimes they'll just do their thing. But as she did that, she reached a point where they couldn't move any further. And it slowed down. And now it was taken over by the government of Southern Sudan. And Vice President Riek Machar is doing it. And he started negotiating with the LRA, and up to now, yes, we can talk about small obstacles here and there. They negotiate today, tomorrow they break away, and they go in their different directions, they come back again, but at least there is a process. Now, what has happened, this is like playing soccer. You don't have to score the ball to be a player. As long as you can pass intelligently, then somebody can kick it in. Then that's what they're playing. Right now, the United Nations has added a component. They appointed a special envoy, who is former President Chisano of Mozambique. Because these people had reached a stalemate where the LRA said, we no longer trust the mediator. We think he sides with the Ugandans. And we no longer feel safe within Southern Sudan. So the venue becomes a problem, and the mediator becomes a problem. So how do you continue? It means they had to stop for maybe 2 months. But now I heard maybe this week as I'm talking, maybe they're talking because President Chisano was tasked by the Secretary General of the United Nations to go in between the Ugandans and the LRA. The LRA had proposed to go to Kenya or South Africa. I don't know the reasons. Maybe there's good shopping malls or whatever. Oh yeah, as rebels, you look for those little things also. You need a little bit of comfort, But it didn't happen. Those leaders said, no, stay where you are. So now the UN had the special envoy who mediated between these two persons, accept the mediator in the venue. So I don't know now how they're proceeding, but I think that's where you see how these things go. And it's not yet resolved. It's still going to continue. Another example is the Machakos that happened for Southern Sudan. We didn't play a role in that, but I think it was incremental. The Carter Center had met with both sides. We trained the SPLA negotiation team in Nairobi. We trained the Sudanese negotiation team in Nairobi. And because of the reestablishment of bilateral relations between Sudan and Uganda, President Museveni met with al-Bashir and for the first time invited John Garang to Kampala to talk. And from there, that's when they started, let's go for a serious talk. So that's how these things go. We can talk for the whole day, but I'd appreciate. But if you go to a Culture of Peace online journal, you see an article there about complementarity because we say we do track 1.5 diplomacy. We have track 1 diplomacy, which you are doing, at the highest level. Then we have track 2 diplomacy, which is done by NGOs, small NGOs at the grassroots level. But we sort of fit in between there because we have the agility to go down to talk to the local people and take that information up to the highest level and try to link these things for implementation. Any other question?
I think we're a little short on time. Anybody have anything pertinent? All right. Thank you, Jeffrey, very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.